Horror has been a staple genre of fiction for a very long time. From the literary novel to the video game, horror has left its mark on many a medium, but the most well-known of these is the horror film. More than well-known, horror films and the act of watching one has become ingrained in Western culture. It is a must-do activity during October leading up to Halloween. But from which era of horror films should you watch? Which is the greatest? To mark this Halloween, let us discuss what I think is the greatest era in horror films, the 1960s. Now before I start, I must address that sweeping statement in the title and thumbnail, as I'm sure people will disagree with it. Now I will be the first to admit that the 1960s are not objectively the best period. The 1980s are far and away the most iconic, influential, and important era of horror. The 1970s are not too far behind, and even the 2010s is a contender. Yet, the 60s era is my favorite, and after watching this video, I hope to explain why that is, and maybe convince some of you to make it your favorite as well. A big reason why I am drawn to the horror movies of the 1960s is that they don't rely on overblown violence to create its horror. Coming from someone who unironically likes grindcore, you'd think I could handle a little blood and gore in my horror movies, but I just can't do it. I'm too squeamish. Music and film are very different avenues of horror. Give me some Cannibal Corpse to listen to and I'll be relaxed. Hell, I'll fall asleep to it. But show me any Saw movie and I'm tapping out immediately. The bloodiest horror movie I've managed to finish is 1990's Hardware, so that's about where my limit is. Great movie by the way, highly recommend. The point being, I was never a fan of the slasher, or the splatter, or the body horror, and for a long time, I thought that's all horror films were like, so I never watched them. But after a late night on the Internet Archive watching public domain horror films from the 60s, I realized there are different types of horror film, specifically 2 types. To help describe them, let me return to metal music and make a comparison. On one hand, you have your Cannibal Corpse horror films, violent, visceral, primal. This type of horror film wants to make you feel deeply uncomfortable, to overwhelm your senses, your danger responses, and ultimately scare you as horror is meant to do. Now I think Cannibal Corpse is okay, but it's nowhere near my favorite. Not like King Diamond and its representative horror films. Atmospheric, dramatic, campy, almost operatic. These horror films enrapture you with their theatricality, harkening back to the stage of Shakespeare, but unsettle you through their building atmosphere and graphic topics. It is more focused on suspense and mystery, utilizing traditional images of horror. You know, graveyards, ghouls, and ghosts. Of these 2 kinds of horror, most 60s horror finds itself in the latter, which explains why I like these old films so much, because I've always preferred King Diamond to Cannibal Corpse. By retaining these traditional ideas of horror, 60s horror is very much a continuation of the styles popular during the 1930s and 40s. However, what separates the 60s from these earlier decades is the beginning of an evolution in the genre, a shift to far darker subject matter and more graphic depictions than ever seen before. Remember, The Exorcist is not too many years away. See, just because they are not as graphic or gruesomely terrifying as the horror films today, doesn't mean these older films aren't spooky. Just look at the demon monster in 1957's Night of the Demon. Now it might look like an obvious prop to us today, but you gotta admit, for 1957, that's pretty creepy. The fakeness of it makes it even scarier, I'd say. If it was CGI, it wouldn't be scary at all. Look out of place if anything. But since it's a physical contraption, it not only fits into the scene, but it leans into that uncanny valley that is so delightfully eerie. Or better yet, the iconic opening scene of 1960's Black Sunday. The medieval aesthetics, the lighting, the costumes, and of course, when they put on the mask. It is a masterpiece of fear and unease. These horror films are still not as intense as they are today, but they are scarier than you would expect from the time period. The way I see it, the horror films in the 60s were performing a balancing act between their attributes. Not too gruesome, but not too safe. Artistic, but not pretentious. Entertaining, but not a comedy, unless that's what you want. Balance it well, and you get Black Sunday. Do it poorly, and you get Manos the Hands of Fate. Thankfully, there are plenty of great, well-rounded 1960s horror films. And yes, I do count 1959 as the 60s. What can I say? I'm provocative. One thing you might recognize about this list is the prevalence of one actor, the legendary king of horror himself, Vincent Price. Why he appears so prominently in this list is that I consider his films to be the model of what 60s horror is and what I love about it. 1960s House of Usher, a story of cursed blood, madness, and decay. Despite its low budget, it managed to create a gothic mood through the set design of the Usher mansion itself and the emotionally intense performance of its small cast. Like the Edgar Allan Poe story it is based upon, the sense of gloom is palpable. 1963's The Comedy of Terrors, a horror comedy about a struggling mortician who kills his clients to drum up business. Starring some of the biggest names in horror at the time, this movie isn't very scary, but seeing these actors in a comedic role makes the viewing experience a delight. And despite being 62 years old, its one-liners and morbid humor still hold up well today.
I am afraid, madam, that he has made his final crossing to that Stygian shore.
What?
He's dead.
1964's Masque of Red Death, the fantastically gothic story of a devil-worshipping prince hiding in his castle from a deadly plague, reveling in debauchery all the while, only for that plague to pay him a visit. Visually striking thanks to its Technicolor photography, featuring a gothic villain of such sinister evil and yet still very amusing. It is a film I like so much that its poster adorns the walls of my own castle. These films can be campy, hammy, slow-paced, tropey, low-budget, and not particularly horrifying to modern audiences, but above all, they are a joy to watch. A large part of that is Vincent Price himself, the king of horror. In case you couldn't tell by the thumbnail, I am a big fan of Vincent Price. Why I am is for a number of reasons. He's a great actor, a celebrated cook, and a lover of the arts. But most of all, I wholeheartedly believe that just by him being in a movie, he elevates it into something special, all thanks to his iconic presence. The refined charm, the grand theatricality, the commanding presence. It's all so delightfully gothic. Now, gothic horror is a genre that has gone by the wayside in recent years. I mean, yeah, there are some, plus Guillermo del Toro's new Frankenstein movie, but it's not like they had back in the day. Price's gothic aura harkens back to that older, austere period of film, back when everybody spoke with mid-Atlantic accents. Even as horror got more graphic, he retained that timeless, classic horror appeal, which I think adds a lot to the enjoyment of watching his films. Now, gothic horror might not be everyone's favorite genre of horror. They might think it's too dry, archaic, boring even, but to me, it's like a warm blanket on a winter's night. Some use the term cozy horror to describe these movies, but I'm not so sure if that's the right word. Sure, that term fits a few of these films, but I wouldn't call Witchfinder General cozy. Rather, the horror in gothic horror is sparing enough that it acts as the spice which accentuates the overall creepiness you already feel in a scene. It's the dressing on the salad, not the lettuce. I'm no film critic. I don't have the vocabulary to describe exactly why I like these 60s horror films, other than fun. They're fun to watch, and beyond the base entertainment horror films provide, they give an artistic pleasure as well, by creating a cinematic atmosphere that can both unsettle you and impress you. Like, look at the shadows, the fog. It's beautiful. 60s horror is my greatest era, despite its less prominent footprint in the genre today, because it combines the new and the old. The gothic, atmospheric, and classic appeal of the 30s and 40s remains prominent. Yet, through its proximity to the more graphic shift in the 70s, it still has that quintessential horror bite without sacrificing its watchability. Transition periods are not often people's favorite. Most either like one or the other, but 60s horror has the best of both worlds. I may be in the minority with that opinion, but it's just the era I enjoy watching the most. In the end, isn't that what movies are for? I'm Old and Gold, Like and subscribe if you want, and thanks for watching.